Welcome to Founders Future, podcast powered by closers.io, where we dive into the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and explore the road ahead for them and their companies. I'm your host, Jay Encarnacion, and in each episode, we uncover the stories behind impactful ventures, the challenges faced along the way, and the strategies driving their future growth. Today, we're thrilled to have Drea Burbank, the founder and CEO of Savimbo. Drea brings a fascinating mix of expertise from her MD at Stanford University School of Medicine to living in the Colombian Amazon, where she's built Savimbo, a company revolutionizing fair trade carbon credits for small farmers and indigenous communities. She's here to share how she's blending technology and conservation to stop deforestation and empower communities, and her vision for scaling this mission-driven venture. So let's dive right in. Drea, welcome to Founders Future.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Happy to have you on today. So I would love to start at the top here, Drea, for our listeners. Take us back to the very beginning. So, what specific problem in the carbon credit or conservation landscape, perhaps around unfair markets or community exclusion, really inspired you to start Savimbo?
Yeah, so there's actually a really interesting backstory here. So I'm going to make two corrections, and they're both really interesting about this story. The first is I'm not the only founder of Savimbo. There's three of us.
Okay.
I'm the only English-speaking founder.
Gotcha.
So Johnny and Fernando are two indigenous guys in the Amazon that try for like 20 years to start a business that will help save the jungle, and they totally fail multiple times with different great business ideas, not because they're bad entrepreneurs, but because of the ecosystem that surrounded them. So when they met me, I was the first English speaker that had access to a different banking, infrastructure business ecosystem. And also serendipitously, I also had this other background. So at Stanford, what I studied was, I didn't do my MD either. I got my MD in Canada. What I studied at Stanford was preventative medicine, and particularly how to get a population to stop smoking, start exercising, or stop drinking soda pop at a population scale. So randomly, they meet the one person who has all these tips and tricks of how to get a population to do something. So that was the marriage that made Savimbo.
Love that. I
Yeah.
love. Okay, so obviously you have a deep background here, and it seems that you really have a passion for what you're doing. So, ending up in Colombia is incredible. I'm actually half Colombian myself, so very cool that you are there. So I would love for you to walk us through how Savimbo's offer has evolved thus far. So, what you provide, I know the carbon credits, biodiversity credits, community support, and who you're serving. How has that changed since you guys first started Savimbo?
Yeah, and I think that's so relevant. It's so important as a company to know why you're doing what you're doing. Like, a lot of people who say when you start a company, you start with values. And I always thought that was a little chachi, like maybe, okay, sure, you're just doing that to impress people. But our value and our aim from the beginning, that's one of the first things we wrote down. And it was our value was now, like what works now, not like what works in some utopian future or what are people saying you should do, but what can you do today? And then the second one was we wanted to stop deforestation. So Johnny and Fernando wrote down these three aims that were their goals, and I fully agree with them. And they wanted a for-profit company, and they wanted it to be a green economy that could compete with the other economies in the jungle, which was mining, logging, narco trafficking, cattle, and petroleum. And then they wanted it to be no strings attached. And those were their like parameters for how an indigenous business needed to look. And then we had the aim to stop deforestation using this mechanism. And so as a result, we explored carbon credits first, because that was the most obvious way to solve the problem. And like a lot of businesses or early startups, we thought this was going to work. When we got into the market and started transacting the credits and doing the science, we found two big problems. One is the science wasn't up to snuff in forests. It just really wasn't adequate. And the second one was that the market was full of entrenched intermediaries. And it was just, we didn't see any way to beat our way through it. So we went back to the drawing board because we knew what our goal was. It wasn't to sell carbon. Our goal was to stop deforestation. And we came up with biodiversity credits. So we used Johnny's methodology that he's been using for like 20 years. And we wrote a new methodology. And now we're the first certified methodology in the world for biodiversity. We protect forests for 70% cheaper than carbon. And the locals get 4 times more money.
That is incredible. And
Yeah.
such a short amount of time, it seems like you've been able to achieve so much already. So, I mean,
Yeah.
kudos you guys for doing so much. I know that's going to impact so many lives. So just incredible what you're able to bring to the table so far. Can only imagine what you're going to do with, moving forward and pushing on growth. So, I mean, I would love to hear your take on this because obviously you've made so many drastic decisions to be where you are now. And so many founders that I have on the show, have a moment where they almost gave up. Right. So I would love to hear that from your front. Did you have a moment where you were, almost threw in the towel, and what did you do to push through that moment?
Yeah, and I one of those things that another also thought doesn't matter. Like, why would I do this? Our first investors was Sputnik ATX from Austin,
Yeah.
and they're pretty well known in Austin for being, for actually giving a large amount of capital up front. I'm kind of neutral on the safe note, but they did give us a large amount of capital and good training. They have really good training, and the first thing they had us do was read the book Grit. They said read it to cover or don't show up for an incubator. I was like, okay, sure, whatever. But I was just talking to them again last week. It's 3 years later. They've gone the distance with us in a big way. They've been good advisors for the 3 years, and they've got a lot of experience. And I looked at them and I said, you know what? If I had not been insane, we would not be in business. Like, there were so many points where any sane person would have just quit. And the only reason that we still have a company and it's still doing so great is because I just didn't quit. And that's really tough to do. It's really tough. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I definitely want to understand more because this is kind of, foreign to me as well. I know a lot of our listeners may be new to this. So, really walk us through the nuts and bolts. So, how is Savimbo generating revenue today as a business, and how do you structure it for your buyers?
Yeah, and actually this is not too tough because I work with indigenous people. So one of our principles is that they have to understand the deals that we're making with them. And we're not talking about super sophisticated business people. They're amazingly sophisticated about natural systems. So we have a 50-50 gross revenue split. So that means off the top, when we sell a credit, 50% cash goes back to the community that generated the credit. No questions asked about how they preserved the animals or saved the forest or did whatever. They earned it, they get it. And they don't have to speak English or do any crazy science to get the rewards of proving that the ecosystems are intact. On our end, we cover all costs of certification, and we have a ground staff that does all of the tracking and monitoring and legal and sales and branding and all of that. And we take that out of our side. The revenue is pretty good, like, because we only hire locals, we have a ridiculously low footprint on operations. And that's been our goal from all along. We might get less money than carbon, but because we pay locals and we hire locals, we're twice as effective and our operations costs are lower.
Absolutely incredible. So, I mean, I would love to understand what works well for you guys as far as acquiring new clients, right? New business into this structure for you guys.
Well, we're a two-sided marketplace. And so we don't have any problem acquiring supply like a lot of people do, and I'll explain why in a second. We're still in the frontier of sales. So the biodiversity credit sales on the buy side is a frontier market. It hasn't quite popped yet, and we're definitely early to market. So we're in the cold call phase of, launching a novel disruptive product. But for the supply side, the reason that we have that nailed down is because we are an indigenous company. And so it's a totally different story. Usually most people are down here beating on doors and asking them to join their carbon colonialist project. In contrast, for us, we're usually like, no, we couldn't possibly. We're so busy, like, we can't go to your site. And then if they call again, or if they beg us, we'll like, okay, maybe we'll go, but like, so playing hard to get.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely sounds like you have a solid process in place at the moment and it's working well. So, I mean, on
Yeah.
that same front, help us understand what the sales process for you guys looks like. So, from initial contact with somebody to closing a deal with them, is it something that you're handling on your own? I know you have, your partners there. Do you have a team under you, sales team? What does that kind of look like operationally overall?
Yeah. Okay. So are you talking about the supply side or the marketplace side? Because they're totally different.
Yeah, maybe a bit of
Yeah.
both. Honestly, if you want to give us some insight on both a little bit.
Okay, so we are a really weird business because not a lot of indigenous communities have businesses.
Yeah.
And there's international regulation that regulates how you can work with an indigenous community. And it's called UN DRIP, or Indigenous Rights. There's a number of different international accords. The most important part is what they call free, prior, and informed consent. In other words, they have to really know what they're signing up for before they sign it. And they don't just get that once, they get that ongoing. So if they decide a year later they don't want to work with you, they can leave. This is a big deal, and it's all about equity and like, you know, running ethical markets, but this is a totally different worldview for money, value, the value of animals, everything. And so we usually estimate it takes about 6 months for a community to actually consent. It doesn't matter if they come in the first day and say, I want to sign the contract, I'm good to go. We're like, no, and not until we are positive you know what you're consenting to and why. So that's we usually budget no strings attached interface where we provide resources, training, equipment to the community, and they have 6 months to figure out if they want to go forward with us or they want to just stop and keep the equipment. Yeah.
Wow. This is something
Um,
look more into. It's very, very fascinating to me so far. I'm loving
yeah.
it. On.
If they decide, and that's a both sides vetting. So if they decide to go forward, they then become co-owners of Savimbo to a small extent. And then they are also in a collective brand with other communities. And we're vetting on both sides to make sure they want to make sure we're ethical and we're actually going to pay them. And we want to make sure that they are going to be an equivalent brand with the other indigenous communities.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
So there's some real sophistication to it and making sure that the communication is there across the board so they know what they're getting into and they're not blindsided by anything. So I mean that just goes to show what you guys are really bringing to the table where that's most important. And it really shows from how you're communicating that across right now. So
Yeah.
I mean, on that same page there, talk to us a little bit about, is there any bottlenecks that you can kind of point to for the growth of the company, whether that be, again, I know you're cold calling, so lead generation or converting leads, like, you know, what does that look like as far as a bottleneck that you can point to right now?
Yeah, for sure. So now that we've generated the credits, which is about a 2-year process to get international certification, we're about to go hit the commodities exchanges on the sales side. So now we're escalating our sales from like, hey, you're my friend and I'm selling to you, or you called me and fine, I'll do it, to like actual talking to enterprises, enterprise sales, blah, blah, blah. I think our biggest decision, I would call it a decision point, not a bottleneck, is which market is going to be the right size to accommodate us and also the right speed to accommodate us. So we might end up working with consumers first and then switching to enterprise or traders and then switching to small business. We have 4 different kind of areas that are interested and we don't know which one's going to be best. So right now we're doing pilot testing in all of them.
Very interesting. So,
but we have to pick one.
Yeah. Do you have a team that does, you know, which direction, or is that something that you'll be taking on?
Very small team. Right now we're in an incubator we got a federal government grant, so they do commercialization incubators, and so they're helping us kind of sort through some of these questions. We're doing 100 customer discovery interviews this week, which is a really good exercise, and I never would have done it if they hadn't made me.
Yeah.
Like calling 100 people and asking them what they think about you is your business is painful and super informative, which is why probably nobody does it and they made me do it.
Well, yeah, I guess that definitely puts things into perspective a little bit. So I'm with you on that there. But
Yeah.
I guess it has to be done, right? To really get you in a position where you guys can see the most success, you have to get that real input and intake for what's going on and how people feel about it.
The best advice I ever got about startups was said that CEOs had to be your first salesperson. And they're right, because if you offload it, there's too much information that you're missing, and you can always offload the painful cold calls on somebody else, but then you're missing all of those reactions and directions and stuff. And there's a data volume problem. Like obviously I don't have enough time to call 1,000 people, but strategically 100 calls is pretty damn good information that you need.
Yeah, no, it'll definitely give you a good set to work from. I see that for sure. So, I mean, as far as your vision goes for Savimbo, what is the major focus and priority for the next 6 to 12 months, you know, as far as growing and what you really want to achieve?
Okay, so we have kind of, as a company, we're pretty sure about what we do in the market now, and that took about a couple of years to figure it out. So it wasn't like we thought we knew what we were doing. We know what outcome we want, stop deforestation. As far as what we do, we figured out that Savimbo is a model of how. Like everybody's always talking about why didn't you do it? That person didn't do it. That other person's not doing it, blah, blah, blah. Savimbo is very much about prototypes, launching scalable products. We do a lot of free things people can copy to collaborate with us. And so we've gotten a reputation for that. this year, our goal is to show that biodiversity credits are a viable market, get it to sales, get it to service, and have it functioning. And then the next thing is we want to turn our attention to agroforestry, specifically for coffee, and start developing that and getting those sales functioning. And the reason is there's your deforestation. Biodiversity credits are on the forested side, and agroforestry is on the deforested side. And you want to pay both sides of that line to get it to stop moving into the forest. So.
So, I mean, you have my mind spinning right now because it's, very new to me, but it's so incredible of what's out there and what you can really do and what you can build. I mean, and to stop deforestation, I think is one of the more important things that needs to be a focus in today's day and age, because it's happening a lot. So I'm definitely glad that we have people like yourself at the forefront of these types of businesses and are doing what you can do. So I would love to get a little bit of hypothetical with you right now for our listeners to really hear how you are thinking on this front. So we have a genie, we snap our fingers, and you have unlimited resources now. What is something that you would implement immediately into Savimbo for its growth?
I would immediately give all 22 indigenous sites starting funds. And I wouldn't give them cash. I would give them salaries, starting prototype salaries. I get them all their equipment that they need to start working. And they usually get from us computers, iPhones, game cameras, Starlink. The next thing I would do is immediately interface or invest in extending our fintech payment system, because there's so many other users that want to use it. And equitable payments are a big issue. So it's a secondary revenue stream, but also it just strengthens everything we're doing. Oh my God. That's a great thought experiment. There's so many things that I want to do, but I think I would sit down and really focus on really nailing down with a good science team the agroforestry protocol that's modular, where there's a ton of problems that are just unsolved in the science. And if you can just put a little bit of time into the different things, you could really make a much more robust modular protocol that could go international really fast.
So, I mean, on this side of things, I mean, I'm very interested to hear your take, and that's as far as the industry goes that you're in, right? What do you see the evolution of the industry, and how are you positioning yourself, especially with your focus on the biodiversity, fair trade, deforestation? How are you positioning yourself for the evolution in the industry?
Yeah, if you look at the climate markets as agricultural markets that have failed to optimize, the intermediaries are going to go away. Like, you don't pay a lot of intermediaries in your soybean supply chain. You pay the minimum amount of intermediaries and you pay the farmer that actually grows the soybean. And that's not happening in climate markets because people are under some rabid delusion that AI is the market. It's not. Like, climate markets, you need trees in the ground and you need animals alive. And this is a physical, tangible problem. So I see a huge amount of market optimization coming in the next 10, 20 years, where people realize what's necessary to get the job done and what's not. And our take on it is the people who are really necessary is the 1 billion people that live in tropical forests, and everybody else is kind of unnecessary.
Incredible to hear just how your mind is working with all these things. I mean, I'm absolutely loving it. So I do want to go into a bit of a lightning round here for our listeners here, Drea. So, I mean, the first question I have, and I'm very intrigued to hear your answer, is what is a tool or a resource, right? Maybe it's a technology that you're using, a strategy from, when you were in school or getting your MD, but what's been a game changer for Savimbo thus far?
Airtable.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Google infrastructure like fiend. I use all Google products all the time just because they interoperate really well. But the big game changer for us has been Airtable. Yeah.
It's just the ease of use for it and just how you really get
The
everything.
reason is you can build a crappy software that services your business for about the first 2 years on Airtable for very low costs, and it saves you having to deal with developers when you're sorting out data structure. Then your data structure is defined. You know what actually makes money for your business, right? And that's when you go and turn it into computer code.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I know many of our listeners are going to hear that and definitely take advantage. So appreciate that little insight there. And then just two more questions for you before we wrap up here. And I know you kind of mentioned something earlier, but what is the best piece of advice that you've received about scaling a business to kind of expand on that point a bit?
The best piece of advice I ever got was from one of my old bosses, Jeff Rutledge, who ran Health Tap in Silicon Valley, and he had done work for WebMD and a bunch of other like high growth startups. And he said, it's counterintuitive, but in startup world, it's better to build something, tear it down, and rebuild it than to build it. It's better to build something small, tear it down, and rebuild it bigger, and then tear it down and rebuild it bigger than it is to build it to scale in the first place, which totally blew my mind. It's totally counterintuitive. You think it's a huge waste of resources, but at least for the first few years. And then the last one is this so weird. In medicine, I train in early childhood development. And one of the things they tell doctors is that each child at a different age is a totally different human being. Like it's a different human body, like a different species. Like a 6-year-old is a different species than a 3-year-old. And that's true of startups as well. So even though it's super close together, a 3-year startup is about the same as a child, and it needs to be treated differently than a 2-year startup.
Wow, it's definitely a very, very cool insight and way to look at things there. And definitely opens up a lot of eyes for business owners that are out there and hit some walls and struggle a bit and then hear something like that and know like, all right, let's rebuild, let's keep going, let's keep pushing forward. So I mean, I absolutely love that piece of advice. And then just to round us out, what is a piece of advice that you could offer to our listeners right now, other founders and entrepreneurs who are in the space really trying to take off like you are?
I mean, nobody ever knows if they're taking off for the first. You don't really know if you made it. I think if your business is stable enough to go off on its own and toddle away till it's about 12 years old, it's about like a child.
Yeah.
Like it's still a little dependent. The best thing that ever happened to me was this is so esoteric, so I'm hesitant to even suggest it. But the best thing that ever happened to me as a business owner was finding a book called A Course in Miracles. It's a book about forgiveness. Sounds super dorky and it's a little spiritual, so bear with me. But there's like a set of daily workbooks, and I would not use the knockoff version. I do the original. But when I started doing those, it changed the way that I believed other people around me were. And I stopped judging them and I started taking accountability for my own stuff. And I'm still not the best at it, but when you're in a startup or a small business, there's so much emotional crap that gets in the way of running a good business because you're so close to people and you're under stress. That's been the best tool I ever had for running a successful business.
Incredible. I mean, I could sit here with you all day and really pick your brain about it. But with that there, we will end on that point, and that does wrap up another inspiring episode here of Founders Future. Drea, I just want to thank you again. I mean, a remarkable journey so far, sharing your insights and what you're doing is really so impactful, and we need more Drea Burbanks in the world. So again, thank you so much for what you're doing and joining us today. To our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Founders Future wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. You can also find more resources and insights at closers.io, where we're dedicated to helping businesses accelerate their growth through trained appointment setters and world-class marketing systems. Until then, keep climbing, and we'll see you on the next one.